Hey everyone, so it is already July, which means that I'm going to be doing my reading wrap up for the second quarter of the year, which means that we've already like reached the halfway point of 2022, which is crazy. But I'm going to be talking about the 11 books that I read in April, May and June. It wasn't my best reading few months of the year, but I did read a few very good books. So first of all, let's take a look at some statistics, because I made a few pie charts, which I like making, just looking at all of my statistics for the past few months. So let's go. I have them there on my laptop, so if I'm looking there, that is why. First of all, let's take a look at the genre. So in total, I read 11 books. 4 of them were non-fiction, 3 of them were contemporary. Then we have 1 literary fiction, 1 classic, 1 poetry collection, and 1 mystery/thriller book. The age categories, I read 10 adult books and 1 young adult. 6 of those 11 books were physical books, 4 of them were audiobooks, and lastly 1 ebook. In terms of pages, I read 1833 pages, 369 were in April, then 997 in May, which was my best reading month in terms of pages, and then 467 in June. When it comes to audiobooks, I didn't listen to any audiobooks in May. However, I listened to 12 hours worth of audiobooks in April and then 26 hours in June. Quite a lot. I listened to so many good audiobooks in June. I'm very excited to talk about them. And lastly, the ratings. I kind of rounded them up or rounded them down for the ratings. So I read around 3 3-star books, then 6 4-star books, and let me see, 2 5-star books. Okay, these were all of the statistics. Now I'm just going to go through all the books. I'll be giving you brief reviews of all the books because there are only 11, so I can definitely give some small reviews of all of them. Firstly, I read The Paris Apartment. This is a thriller book that takes place in Paris. You follow this girl who goes to Paris to visit her brother, and she's going to be living in this apartment where stuff is going down. Mystery things are happening, and we are following her perspective, like seeing what is going to happen, how is everything connected. And it was quite a nice thriller. I normally don't really read much mystery thriller, but I actually enjoyed this one very much. I like the Paris vibes. I'm actually going to Paris in October, so it was kind of exciting reading about Paris. And I enjoyed it. I wasn't too impressed by the whole finale and like the entire mystery aspect, but it was still a fun mystery. So I decided to give it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read My Dark Vanessa. This is a very popular one at the moment, and this is basically about a girl who is having a relationship with her teacher, and this teacher is actually being accused of sexual assault. However, they were in love when they first had sex, and this is a very disturbing but also interesting and very fascinating story about this relationship between, you know, this underage student and her teacher. It was definitely messed up and a bit disturbing at times, but I also flew through it and I definitely get the hype. So I decided to give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Do recommend you to read some trigger warnings beforehand, but I definitely understand why people thought this one was very good, because I thought so too. I like these books that are just a bit like, oh my god, you know, what the hell? Next up, I read something completely different. It's called Sweet Bean Paste, and this is written by a Japanese author, and it takes place in this little bakery in Japan where they make these kind of sweet bean paste filled pastries. And you follow this man who works there, who meets this very old lady who sometimes visits the shop, but she apparently can make amazing sweet bean paste, and she starts to work there. So it's basically the story about them getting to know each other. And it's a very simple premise. You just start to learn more about this old woman and her history, and it was very beautiful, and it feels incredibly kind of calming as well, because it takes place in this, you know, very simple atmosphere of just a cute bakery. So I enjoyed this one a lot, and I gave it 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This one was gorgeous. This is written in this kind of poetry style, and it was absolutely beautiful. This is all about a man who writes a letter to his mum who cannot read, and in this letter he just talks about their family and their family history and everything that their family's been through with the Vietnam War, as well as just these different family dynamics. And it was incredibly beautiful and fascinating, and the writing style was so good. So I totally get the hype as well. It was beautiful, and I don't really want to tell you too much about it. I would just say read it. because I highly recommend it. I decided to give it like 4.25 out of 5 stars. I don't know, it wasn't a 5-star read, but it definitely just really caught my attention, and I couldn't stop reading. It was incredibly beautiful. Next, I read The Pursuit of Love. I got this one a few months ago in England, and this is a romance book that is written quite a few decades ago, and it's a bit of like a romance comedy, but to be honest, I didn't really enjoy it too much. It really felt very rushed. It's basically about these women finding husbands, or like trying to find husbands, and I wasn't very into the characters. I couldn't really be bothered by them finding husbands and how quick it all went. So maybe it was much more popular like decades ago, but I didn't really enjoy it too much. I think I gave it like 2.5, maybe close to a 3 stars, but yeah, it wasn't amazing, it was just okay. Then I read one that was amazing, Boys Don't Cry. I also randomly picked this one up in a bookstore when I was in England a few months ago and absolutely loved it. This was my first 5-star of Q2. This is all about 2 young brothers, and they're always told, like, you know, boys don't cry, just be tough. However, their dad has cried and they're like, isn't it okay to cry as well? It follows their 2 lives and everything that they're going through. They're living in a neighborhood that isn't very safe. There's a lot of drugs involved, violence, and it's a very like simple story that you constantly, like, you just switch between the 2 perspectives, and it is incredibly tragic and sad. It made me cry, like, it definitely made me cry. It was very moving and beautiful. So if you feel like reading a sad book that will make you feel things and will make you feel all the emotions, highly recommend this one. I read it in like a few days and it was so good. This is definitely a new favorite. Then my audiobook obsession with non-fiction books started in June, because the first audiobook I listened to was The Royal Art of Poison, and as the title suggests, this is all about poison from like the Middle Ages to Tudor eras, and how poison was used to, you know, get rid of enemies, and how absolutely obsessed people were with poison, but also, you know, finding out and like being crazily obsessed with trying to figure out if someone wanted to poison you. And it was very just you know, it made you feel like this is disgusting. It wasn't only about poison, but also just about how unhygienic life was hundreds and hundreds of years ago, how people died from the most disgusting diseases, and how often they actually killed themselves because they used substances where they were like, oh, this will be good for me, this will make me healthy, this will make sure that I won't die from poison, but they were actually poisoning themselves. It was just incredibly fascinating and disturbing and interesting, and just I learned so many weird facts, but it was so interesting. So if you feel like reading a very weird, different book and want to learn some very unique facts, this is definitely the book for you. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and since I was in a very big non-fiction audiobook mood, I started looking for other audiobooks to listen to, and I found A Curious History of Sex. Well, again, as the title suggests, this is all about sex. It was so incredibly interesting and so kind of refreshing to see how much we've learned over the years, and also disturbing as well, because there were so many things in history where women were thought to be, you know, dirty down there, and how they felt like they had to clean themselves down there. Like, actually, like, this is getting a very much too much information, but I'm so glad that we are living in the 21st century where we have learned so much more about the human anatomy and the human body, and how we've learned the healthy ways of, you know, taking care of our bodies and the healthy ways of having sex. And this was so incredibly interesting and sometimes funny as well, to be honest. Like, not those things, but there were definitely many funny parts in this book. So again, if you're looking for a very interesting and unique non-fiction book, this was definitely one of those. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. Then I read another book that is not non-fiction. I decided to change it up a little bit. I read The Visit from the Goon Squad. This is honestly quite difficult to explain what it's about, because you follow this woman and she worked in like this music industry like studio, and every chapter is about someone else that she knows, but you know that they are somehow connected to her. So every chapter is about a completely new character who knows her, and it was quite interesting and quite enjoyable, but I couldn't really get into the fact that we constantly read from a new character, a new perspective that you had to, you know, get to know, which I thought kind of dragged me out of the story a bit, because I really couldn't focus too long on one particular character, because then we'd be meeting a new character. It was interesting and fun, like reading about, you know, a few decades ago in the music industry, but I didn't enjoy this one too much. It was just fun and okay, and I decided to give it 3 out of 5 stars. And funny thing is, apparently many people had to read this for school if they had like English as a subject or studied literature, and I didn't know that. I got quite a few comments saying, oh, I read this one for school. So that is very fun. Let me know if you have read this one and what you thought of it. I wasn't the biggest fan, but it was definitely a very unique way of telling a story. The final 2 books I read were also non-fiction books. The next one was an audiobook as well. It's called Cultish, and this is all about the language that cults and cult leaders use to lure in people into their cult. Again, a very unique non-fiction book about these random topics. So I decided to read this one about cults, and it was so interesting and so messed up and disturbing and smart and fascinating as well, because these cult leaders are smart as heck, and they know exactly what type of words to use to lure you in. And I learned a lot. And I also learned a lot about things that I see online where it's like, you should be careful with this, because this is the start of something that you don't want to be a part of. It was also about these multi-level marketing schemes and everything, and it was so interesting. So again, highly recommend this one. I gave this one like 4 out of 5 stars as well. And then the final book I read was again a non-fiction book. It is actually a Dutch book. So if you can't speak Dutch, I'm very sorry. It has not been translated yet. I hope it will be. But this is written by Madeleine van den Nieuwenhuizen. She's a very interesting and smart Dutch media critic and historicus. I believe she's also an historian. Historian, I think. And this is called Leven en Laten Leven. So basically live and let live. And it's all about the importance of having a, you know, being able to legally get an abortion. And what's interesting about this big essay, it's an essay basically, is that she also gives people who are pro-choice and pro-life the opportunity to kind of form this discussion, and she gives them the opportunity to express why they specifically are pro-life or pro-choice. So it was also interesting reading about, you know, people who would not vote for a legal abortion, or, you know, their thoughts on why they don't agree with that. So it was interesting that she also gave them, you know, the opportunity to express their opinions about this. But I totally agree with her how incredibly important it is that we have the opportunity to get a legal and safe abortion, especially now what is happening in the United States. This one was released around exactly that time, you know, that was happening, which is very, very, very painful to read about as a woman with a womb. So yeah, this was very good. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. And if you are from the Netherlands, I highly recommend you pick up this book, because it's just so important that people are able to choose what to do with their own bodies, and that men and other people who do not have wombs don't make decisions about that, because get away from our bodies. Thank you very much. So these were the 11 books that I read in the second quarter of the year. I'm very glad with the books that I read. There are definitely a few amazing ones in there. Let me know if you've read any good books in the past few months, and also if you've read any of the books I mentioned in this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked it. And if you want to comment something, but you don't know what to comment, let me see. Comment like an earth emoji, because I read this book on Earth. We're briefly gorgeous. Okay, again, thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I will see you in my next video.